My name is Madeline, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought coming home early for Thanksgiving would change my life forever. The moment I opened our front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was silent, and where my husband Jack should have been, I found only a hastily scribbled note. Had to leave for work, emergency back Friday. As the realization sank in that I was alone in the house with Richard, my husband's stepfather, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the November cold. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had that gut feeling that something just wasn't right. Trust me, this story might make you rethink who you let into your home this holiday season. I met Jack during our sophomore year of college. I was studying marketing and he was pursuing a business degree with dreams of starting his own company someday. We connected instantly over our shared ambition and dry sense of humor. After graduation, we dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. That was 5 years ago, and despite our busy careers, our marriage had been solid. At least that's what I believed until that Thanksgiving. My job as a marketing executive at a national retail chain kept me traveling frequently. I'd been working on a major holiday campaign launch in Dallas that was supposed to keep me away until late Thanksgiving Eve. Jack had been disappointed when I told him about the trip, but he understood that this project could lead to a promotion I'd been working toward for years. Jack's family situation was complicated. His mother died from cancer when he was 15, leaving him devastated. His father, William, remarried rather quickly to Veronica, who brought her then teenage son, Richard, into their lives. Richard was now 59, a wealthy real estate developer with a commanding presence and cold, calculating eyes that always seemed to be evaluating everything and everyone for potential value. From the first time I met Richard at our engagement dinner, something about him made me uneasy. He was overly polite in a way that felt performative, but there was always an undercurrent of dismissiveness when he spoke to me. "Marketing, how interesting," he'd said when Jack proudly told him about my career. "I suppose someone needs to convince people to buy things they don't need." He'd laughed as though it was a joke, but the look in his eyes suggested otherwise. Over the years, Richard's behavior toward me had grown increasingly uncomfortable. There were the lingering looks when he thought no one was watching, the accidental brushes against me when we passed in hallways, and the constant questioning about when Jack and I would have children, often followed by comments about Jack's family obligations. Whenever I mentioned my discomfort to Jack, he would sigh and say, "He's just old-fashioned, Maddie. He doesn't mean anything by it." Or, "That's just Richard being Richard. You're reading too much into it." Eventually, I stopped bringing it up, not wanting to create tension between Jack and his family. For Jack's sake, I tolerated Richard's presence at holidays and family gatherings, maintaining a polite distance whenever possible. In the months leading up to that fateful Thanksgiving, Jack and I had been like ships passing in the night. His software development business was finally taking off, requiring long hours and frequent client meetings. With my travel schedule, we sometimes went days without a real conversation. When we were together, Jack seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and disappearing into his home office for hours at a time. I'd attributed it to work stress, but a small voice in the back of my mind had started to wonder if there was more to the story. The Dallas project wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I made a spontaneous decision to fly home early and surprise Jack for Thanksgiving. I imagined his face lighting up when he saw me, pictured us spending a quiet evening together before the family obligations began the next day. I even picked up ingredients for his favorite pasta dish at the airport, planning to cook for him as soon as I got home. How could I have known that this simple change of plans would unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage and the man who had insinuated himself into our lives? The moment I stepped through our front door, I sensed something was off. The house was too quiet, too still. Usually, Jack would have music playing or the TV on in the background as he worked. "Jack!" I called out, wheeling my suitcase into the entryway. "Honey, I'm home early." No response. I made my way into the kitchen, setting down my bags and the groceries I'd picked up. That's when I saw the note on the counter written in Jack's hurried scrawl. "Had to leave for work, emergency back Friday. Sorry, Jay, no love you or miss you. Just those few impersonal words." I frowned, pulling out my phone to text him when a voice from behind startled me. "Madeline, what a surprise." I whirled around to find Richard standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, casually dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, looking completely at home in my house. "Richard," I managed my heart racing, I didn't expect to see you here. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Jack didn't mention I'd be staying for the holiday. How unlike him to forget such an important detail. I forced a smile, my mind racing. Jack hadn't mentioned anything about Richard staying with us. The plan had been for us to go to Veronica and Richard's house for Thanksgiving dinner the next day. Where is Jack? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His note just says there was a work emergency. Richard waved his hand dismissively. Some client crisis in Chicago. He left yesterday afternoon. Called me to let me know he'd still like me to stay here as planned. Didn't want to leave me without a place to go for the holiday, I suppose. That made no sense. Jack would have called or texted me about such a significant change of plans. And why would Richard be without a place to go? He and Veronica had a massive house just 40 minutes away. What about Veronica? I asked. Isn't she expecting us for dinner tomorrow? A shadow crossed Richard's face. Veronica is visiting her sister in Florida. Some last-minute girls' trip. It was going to be just me rattling around in that big house, so Jack insisted I stay here. He said you wouldn't mind. I definitely would have minded, and Jack knew it. Something wasn't adding up. Let me call Jack and see what's going on, I said, pulling out my phone again. I wouldn't bother, Richard said smoothly. He mentioned he'd be in meetings all day. Said reception was spotty at the hotel. I called anyway. Straight to voicemail. Told you, Richard said with a slight smirk. Looks like it's just you and me for now. We might as well make the best of it. I was about to fix myself a drink. Would you like one? I wanted nothing less than to spend an evening drinking with Richard, but I was in an impossible situation. This was my house, and despite my discomfort, I couldn't just leave. Where would I go? And if I made a scene, it would only create more tension between Jack and me when he returned. Sure, I said reluctantly. Just a small one. As Richard moved to the liquor cabinet, I noticed how confidently he navigated our home, knowing exactly where everything was kept. Had he been here before when I was away? Looking out the window, I saw fat snowflakes beginning to fall. The weather forecast had predicted a major storm, but I'd hoped to beat it home. Now as the snow came down harder, I realized I was effectively trapped in my own house with a man who had always made me feel uneasy. I tried Jack's phone again, still straight to voicemail. I sent a text. Home early, surprised to find Richard here. Call me ASAP. Richard returned with 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to me. To unexpected gatherings, he said, raising his glass with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. As we clinked glasses, I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard wasn't surprised by my early return at all. In fact, he seemed almost pleased that Jack wasn't here, as though this was exactly what he had wanted all along. The snow continued to fall heavily outside, transforming our backyard into a winter wonderland that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Richard insisted on preparing dinner, brushing aside my offers to help as he moved around my kitchen with disturbing familiarity. So, he said casually as he chopped vegetables, how has Jack been lately? He seems stressed whenever we talk. Work has been busy for both of us, I replied cautiously. His company is finally gaining traction with some major clients. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Yes, the business. Quite the accomplishment for him, though I did warn him about expanding too quickly. Young entrepreneurs often overextend themselves. The condescending way he referred to Jack's success irritated me. Jack was 34, hardly a naive youngster, and his business decisions had been sound. Jack knows what he's doing, I said firmly. He's built the company from nothing into something impressive. Richard smiled thinly. With some help, of course. Those introductions I made to the Westlake Group opened a lot of doors. This was news to me. Jack had never mentioned Richard helping him secure clients. In fact, he'd always proudly told me that he'd built his network independently without leveraging his family connections. I didn't realize you were involved with the Westlake deal, I said, trying to mask my surprise. Oh, there's quite a bit about Jack's business dealings that might surprise you, Richard replied, his tone suggesting he was enjoying my discomfort. He and I have had many productive conversations about his career trajectory. Throughout dinner, Richard continued to drop hints about his involvement in Jack's business and personal life, each revelation making me more uneasy. He asked invasive questions about our marriage. Were we happy? Was I fulfilled? Wasn't I concerned about how much Jack worked? Didn't I want children soon before it was too late? Jack and I are very happy. I insisted though, even to my own ears, I didn't sound convinced. The truth was, we had been drifting apart recently, but I'd attributed it to our busy schedules. Hearing Richard imply that Jack was unhappy made me question everything. After dinner, I excused myself to go to the bathroom, taking the opportunity to try Jack's phone again. Still straight to voicemail. On a hunch, I called his assistant, Maria. "Hi, Madeleine," she answered cheerfully. "What's up?" "I'm trying to reach Jack about his Chicago trip," I said. "Do you have the hotel information?" There was a pause. "Chicago trip, Jack isn't in Chicago. He took a few personal days off for Thanksgiving. Said he was spending it with you." My blood ran cold. "When did you last see him?" "Yesterday around noon. He seemed in a hurry, said he had some errands to run before the holiday." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Jack had lied about a work emergency. But why? And where was he really? When I returned to the dining room, Richard had cleared the plates and was pouring more whiskey into our glasses. "Everything all right? You look pale." "Fine," I lied, taking my seat. "Just tired from travelling." I needed to think to figure out what was happening without alerting Richard to my suspicions. If Jack wasn't on a business trip, then where was he? And why would Richard lie about it? "I think I'll check Jack's office," I said casually. "He might have left information about his hotel there." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "I can assure you he's fine. There's no need to go digging through his things." The way he said it, almost like a warning, strengthened my resolve. "I just want to send him something for his presentation tomorrow," I said, standing up. Jack's home office was at the end of the hall, a space that was exclusively his. I rarely entered it, respecting his need for a separate workspace. When I opened the door, everything looked normal at first glance. The dual monitors on the desk, the bookshelf filled with technical manuals, the framed photo of us on our wedding day. But then I noticed the whiskey glasses on the side table, 2 of them, one with a distinct lipstick mark on the rim, a shade of red I had never worn. My hand trembled as I picked up the glass. Was Jack having an affair? Was that where he really was right now? The thought made me sick. As I set the glass down, I noticed that the drawer of Jack's desk was locked. In 5 years of marriage, I had never known Jack to lock his desk. What was he hiding? "Find what you were looking for." I jumped at Richard's voice behind me. He stood in the doorway watching me with an unreadable expression. "Just looking for his itinerary," I said. Trying to sound casual, Richard stepped into the office, his eyes darting to the whiskey glasses. "Ah, I see you found evidence of our little meeting." "Your meeting?" He nodded, moving closer. "Jack and I had a long talk yesterday about his future, about what's best for him." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "And what did you decide was best for my husband?" Richard smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "I merely helped him see some truths he's been avoiding. About his business, about his life." He paused, his eyes boring into mine. "About his marriage." The power chose that moment to flicker and die, plunging the house into darkness as the storm outside intensified. In the sudden quiet, with only the faint glow from Richard's phone illuminating his face, he looked almost predatory. "Looks like we're in for a long night, Madeleine," he said softly. "Just the 2 of us." When the backup generator kicked in a few moments later, casting the house in dim emergency lighting, I found Richard standing uncomfortably close to me. I stepped back instinctively, bumping into Jack's desk. "What exactly did you and Jack discuss about our marriage?" I demanded, fear giving way to anger. Richard's smile was patronizing. "Jack has concerns, Madeleine. Concerns he's been too considerate to share with you." "That's between Jack and me," I said firmly. "Not you." "Ah, but Jack has always valued my advice. Ever since his mother died, I've been the one to guide him, to help him make the right choices." There was something possessive in Richard's voice that sent a chill through me. "Jack is a grown man who makes his own decisions," I countered. Richard laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the small office. "Is that what you think? That he chose you independently? That his business success is his own doing? That any part of his life isn't shaped by my influence?" The arrogance in his voice pushed me over the edge. "I don't know what game you're playing, Richard, but I want you to leave. Now." Instead of becoming defensive, Richard seemed amused by my demand. "Leave in this storm that would hardly be hospitable of you." He gestured to the window where snow was blowing sideways in the howling wind. "Besides, this is a conversation that's long overdue. Don't you want to know why your husband really left, where he really is?" Despite myself, I did want to know. "Fine, tell me." "Jack is re-evaluating his priorities, but," Richard said smoothly, "the business is at a critical juncture. He needs to focus to make connections with the right people. Your career ambitions have become a distraction. My career is as important as his, I said, my voice rising. Jack has always supported that. Has he, or has he simply not had the courage to tell you how he really feels, that he resents always coming second to your job, that he wants a traditional family with a wife who's actually present? Each word hit like a physical blow. Had Jack really said these things? Was this what he truly wanted? I don't believe you, I said, but doubt had crept in, and Richard could sense it. You don't have to take my word for it, he said, pulling out his phone. Jack left something for you. He asked me to share it when the time was right. He pulled up an email and handed me the phone. It was from Jack's account sent to Richard yesterday morning. Richard, I can't do this in person. Tell Madeline I need space to think. The past few months have made me realize we want different things. I'll be staying at the lake house until after Thanksgiving. Please don't tell her where I am. I need time to figure out what I want. I read it 3 times looking for any sign that it wasn't real. The email address was Jack's. The writing style sounded like him, but something felt off. This doesn't make sense, I said, handing the phone back. If Jack wanted to tell me our marriage was in trouble, he would have done it himself. Would he? Jack avoids conflict at all costs. Always has. Why do you think he tolerates your dislike of me? It's easier for him to keep the peace than to stand up for what he truly wants. As much as I hated to admit it, there was truth in Richard's words. Jack did avoid confrontation often to our detriment. But still, this felt wrong. The Jack I knew wouldn't hide behind his stepfather. I want to speak to my husband, I said firmly. Now. Richard shrugged. As I said, he doesn't want to be contacted. But don't worry, I'm here to help you through this difficult time. He placed a hand on my shoulder that I immediately shrugged off. I don't need your help. I need you to leave my house. Your house? Richard's tone changed, becoming harder. This house was purchased with a down payment from me. The mortgage is guaranteed by me. Jack may have let you believe this was your little love nest. But make no mistake, Madeline, I have always had a stake in everything Jack owns. I stared at him, horrified by the implication. That's not true. We saved for years for the down payment. Richard smiled coldly. Check the property records if you don't believe me. But then there's so much you don't know, isn't there? About Jack's business, about his finances, about what he really wants in a wife. In that moment, I saw Richard clearly for the first time. This wasn't about Jack at all. This was about Richard's need for control, his obsession with maintaining his influence over every aspect of Jack's life. And I was the obstacle. Get out of my way, I said, trying to move past him toward the door. Richard blocked my path, his substantial frame filling the doorway. We're not done talking, Madeline. Yes, we are. I tried to push past him, but he caught my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. You've never appreciated what Jack needs, he hissed, his facade of civility crumbling. You've been too busy with your career, too selfish to give him children, too stubborn to see that you're holding him back. I wrenched my arm free. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know everything, Richard sneered. I know about the fights you've been having. I know about your reluctance to start a family. I even know about the pregnancy test in your suitcase that you haven't told him about. My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know about the pregnancy test I had purchased just yesterday in Dallas, still unused in my luggage? Had he been going through my things? You went through my suitcase, I asked, horrified. Richard didn't even try to deny it. I needed to understand what kind of woman has such a hold over my stepson. What I found was disappointing but not surprising. Planning to trap him with a baby now that you sense him pulling away. The accusation was so outrageous, so wildly off base that I almost laughed. I had bought the test because my period was late, likely due to stress, and I wanted to be sure before I shared any news with Jack. But Richard's invasion of my privacy, his assumptions about my intentions made one thing crystal clear: this man was dangerous. As I stood there facing Richard, in the dim emergency lighting, with the storm raging outside, cutting us off from the world, I realized I needed to be very, very careful. This wasn't just an uncomfortable situation with an overbearing in-law. This was a man who had been manipulating my husband, lying to both of us, and who now had me isolated and vulnerable. Whatever game Richard was playing, I needed to understand the rules before I could hope to win. In that moment of clarity, facing Richard's twisted version of reality, I made a split-second decision. Instead of continuing to confront him, which was clearly escalating the situation dangerously, I would play along. at least temporarily. I needed to gain time, gather evidence, and find a way to contact Jack directly. I let my shoulders slump in apparent defeat. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice soft and uncertain. Things have been difficult between us lately. I didn't realize Jack had talked to you about it. The change in my demeanor seemed to satisfy Richard. His posture relaxed slightly and the predatory gleam in his eyes dimmed. Jack tells me everything, Madeline. He always has. There was that possessive tone again. He respects my guidance. I nodded, pretending to accept this. I should probably get some rest. It's been a long day of travel, and this is a lot to process. Richard stepped aside, allowing me to exit the office. Of course, we can talk more in the morning. Perhaps with some distance, you'll see that this separation might be for the best. I didn't trust myself to respond without revealing my true feelings, so I simply nodded and headed toward the master bedroom. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. What had happened to Jack? Was he really at our lake house by choice, or had Richard somehow manipulated this entire situation? The email I'd seen could have been fabricated or coerced. And why was Richard so intent on convincing me my marriage was failing? I moved quietly around the bedroom, gathering my thoughts and planning my next moves. First, I needed to find my phone, which I realized I had left in my purse in the kitchen. Without it, I had no way to contact anyone for help. Then I needed to find concrete evidence of Richard's manipulation. Jack and I had been having some difficulties lately, but nothing that suggested our marriage was in crisis. Richard's claims didn't align with the relationship I knew we had. I quietly opened the bedroom door and listened. I could hear Richard moving around in the guest room across the hall. Taking a deep breath, I slipped out and made my way to the kitchen to retrieve my phone. It wasn't there. My purse was on the counter where I'd left it, but my phone was missing. A cold dread settled in my stomach. Richard must have taken it while I was in Jack's office. I returned to the bedroom, my mind racing. The landline. We still had a landline for emergencies. I picked up the receiver in our bedroom only to find it dead. Not just because of the power outage. The cord had been physically cut. Now truly alarmed, I began methodically searching our bedroom for anything that might help me understand what was happening. In Jack's nightstand, I found an old tablet he rarely used. It was password protected, but I knew all his usual passwords from years of marriage. The tablet powered on, and I immediately went to his email account. There was the message to Richard that I had seen earlier, but looking at it more carefully now, something seemed off about the writing style. It was close to Jack's, but not quite right. The phrasing was slightly more formal, the sentence structure more complex than Jack's typically straightforward communication. I kept digging, scrolling through weeks of emails. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Dozens of exchanges between Jack and Richard that showed a pattern of manipulation. Richard offering unsolicited financial help that came with strings attached. Richard subtly undermining Jack's confidence in his business decisions. And most disturbing of all, Richard planting seeds of doubt about me and our marriage. Madeline seems distant lately. Have you considered she might be prioritizing her career over your relationship? Richard had written in one email from a month ago. I noticed she didn't attend the Peterson dinner with you. People are starting to talk. A wife should support her husband's business connections. Read another. Jack's responses started out defensive of me, but over time I could see doubt creeping in. Richard was methodically poisoning my husband against me, and Jack, who had always looked to Richard as a father figure, was vulnerable to the manipulation. But why? What did Richard have to gain from driving a wedge between us? I switched to the browser and searched for our property records, remembering Richard's claim about financing our house. To my shock, he hadn't been lying, at least not entirely. While the house was in both Jack's and my name, there was a lien against the property held by one of Richard's companies. Next, I looked up Jack's business records, which were publicly available. Listed among the board members of Jack's company was Richard holding a 30% stake. Jack had always told me he owned his company outright, with only minor investments from a few silent partners. My hands trembled as I realized the extent of Richard's entanglement in our lives. This wasn't just about control, it was about ownership. Richard saw Jack as an extension of himself, a possession to be managed and directed. And me, I was the threat to that control, the outside influence that might encourage Jack to break free. As I continued searching, I found something else. A folder of family photos on the tablet. Images Jack had scanned from his childhood, including pictures of his mother that he treasured. As I scrolled through them, I noticed a disturbing pattern. In photos from family events, Richard was always positioned between Jack and his father, physically separating them. And in photos after Jack's mother died, Richard's possessive body language became even more apparent. A hand on Jack's shoulder, steering him, an arm around him that looked less protective and more controlling. The most chilling photo was from Jack's college graduation. Jack stood proudly in his cap and gown, but Richard's expression as he looked at my future husband wasn't pride. It was ownership. The same expression I had seen earlier tonight when Richard talked about guiding Jack. A soft knock on the bedroom door made me jump. "Madeline!" Richard's voice came through the door. "I've made some tea. I thought we could talk more about the situation." I quickly shut down the tablet and hid it under the mattress. "I'm actually very tired," I called back. "I think I'll just go to sleep." There was a pause. "I understand, but you should know the storm has knocked out the cell towers. We're completely cut off until morning at least. Try not to worry about Jack. He's exactly where he needs to be." Something in his tone sent chills down my spine. It wasn't reassurance, it was a warning. "Good night, Richard," I said firmly. "Sleep well, Madeline," he replied. "Tomorrow will bring clarity for all of us." As his footsteps retreated down the hall, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind whirling with everything I had discovered. One thing was crystal clear: I needed to find Jack. Not just for the sake of our marriage, but because I was increasingly concerned for his safety. If Richard would go to these lengths to separate us, what else might he be capable of? I waited an hour listening to the sounds of the house settling for the night. When I was certain Richard had gone to bed, I slipped out of the bedroom, determined to find a way to contact the outside world and get to the truth about my husband's whereabouts. The house was eerily quiet as I crept through the hallway, guided only by the dim emergency lights. I made my way to Jack's office first, searching for any communication device Richard might have missed. No luck. Even Jack's spare laptop was missing from its usual drawer. Next, I moved to the kitchen, careful to avoid the creaky floorboard by the island. Our smart home hub was there, its small light indicating it was running on the generator's power. A plan began to form in my mind. Our neighbour Susan had access to our smart home system. Last summer, when we went on vacation, we had given her the login credentials so she could check on the house. If I could send a message through the system, she might see it and understand that something was wrong. I quietly tapped the screen to wake it up. The system was passcode protected, but I knew the code. I navigated to the messaging function and typed SOS, trapped with Richard. Jack missing. Call police. I set the message to display on all connected devices and sent it to Susan's account. Just as I finished, I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I quickly switched the screen to the weather app before turning around. Richard stood in the doorway wearing a bathrobe over pajamas. Having trouble sleeping, he asked, his tone conversational, but his eyes sharp and suspicious. "Just checking the storm status," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, wondering when the power might come back on. Richard moved closer, glancing at the smart home display. "The weather report says the storm will continue through the night. We're likely to be without full power until tomorrow." He reached past me and tapped the screen, backing out to the main menu. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't check the message log. "Looking for this?" he asked, suddenly pulling my phone from his pocket. "I found it on the counter earlier. Battery's dead, I'm afraid. And as I mentioned, the cell towers are down anyway." I forced a grateful smile and reached for the phone. "Thanks. I was wondering where I'd left it." Richard held it just out of reach. "You know, Madeline, I've always admired your intelligence, your resourcefulness. Jack needed someone like you when you met. Someone to help him establish independence, to push him beyond his comfort zone." Kiang. The compliment surprised me, but I remained wary. "Thank you," I said cautiously. "But people grow, they change. What Jack needs now is stability, tradition." Richard set my phone on the counter but kept his hand over it. "The company is at a critical growth stage. The next steps require certain connections, a certain image. And you don't think I fit that image," I stated flatly. Richard smiled thinly. "Let's just say your priorities seem different from Jack's at this point. Your career keeps you travelling unavailable. Jack has mentioned wanting a family soon. He's concerned about your reluctance." This was another lie. Jack and I had agreed to wait a few more years for children until both our careers were more established. We had talked about it openly and were on the same page. "Jack and I have always been clear about our family planning," I countered. "We're in agreement about the timeline." Richard's expression hardened slightly. Are you? Because that's not what he's told me. He's concerned you'll never be ready to prioritize family over your career. That's why he's been reconsidering the marriage. I knew Richard was trying to manipulate me, to make me doubt my relationship, but his words still stung. Had Jack been having second thoughts? Had he been confiding in Richard instead of talking to me directly? No, I reminded myself. I had seen the evidence of Richard's manipulation. This was exactly his strategy, to plant seeds of doubt to drive wedges between us. I think Jack and I should discuss this directly, I said firmly. Where is he, Richard, really? Richard's facade slipped momentarily, revealing a flash of anger before his composed mask returned. As I told you, he's taking time to think. The lake house is the perfect place for that. Then I'd like to join him there, I said. First thing tomorrow, storm or no storm. That would defeat the purpose of his retreat, wouldn't it? Richard replied smoothly. Jack was very clear about wanting space. I decided to take a risk. That's interesting because according to Maria, Jack took personal days to spend Thanksgiving with me, not to retreat to the lake house. Richard's eyes narrowed dangerously. You've been making calls, just confirming details. I said, maintaining eye contact despite the fear building inside me. Jack would have told Maria if he was taking time off to think about our marriage. They're close. Perhaps he didn't want to share his personal problems with an employee, Richard suggested, but I could see he was rattled by my knowledge. Or perhaps he never told you he needed space from me, I countered. Perhaps that email wasn't from him at all. Richard stepped closer, invading my personal space. Careful, Madeline. These accusations are becoming tiresome. I stood my ground. Where is my husband, Richard? For a long moment we stared at each other in the dim light of the kitchen. Then Richard's posture changed subtly. He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a folded document. Jack asked me to give you this if you became difficult, he said, handing it to me. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a draft of separation papers with Jack's signature at the bottom. The date was yesterday. My stomach dropped. Could this be real? Had Jack really been planning to end our marriage? The signature looked authentic, but after everything I'd discovered, I couldn't trust anything Richard presented. I'll need to speak with Jack directly, I said, refolding the document and placing it on the counter. Of course you don't believe it, Richard said with a sigh. Jack said you'd be in denial. That's why he left rather than facing you himself. He knew you'd try to talk him out of it, use your persuasive skills to make him doubt his decision. The way Richard described me made my skin crawl, as if I were some manipulative force in Jack's life rather than his partner and wife. I think I'll go back to bed now, I said, no longer willing to engage with Richard's lies. As I turned to leave, Richard caught my arm. One more thing, Madeline. I took the liberty of moving your suitcase to the guest room. I thought you'd be more comfortable there given the circumstances. The message was clear. He was asserting control over the house, over my movements, over every aspect of the situation. I prefer our bedroom, I said, pulling my arm free. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. As you wish. But remember, this house is as much mine as it is yours. More actually. Sleep well. As I returned to the bedroom and locked the door behind me, I felt a growing sense of dread. Richard wasn't just trying to end my marriage. He was establishing dominance, isolating me, and becoming increasingly bold in his actions. Whatever game he was playing, the stakes were dangerously high. I retrieved the tablet from under the mattress and continued my investigation, determined to find proof of what I now suspected Richard had orchestrated Jack's absence, possibly against his will, and was using the opportunity to try to force me out of the picture permanently. What I didn't know yet was how far he was willing to go to achieve his goal. As morning light filtered through the curtains, I had a plan in place. Throughout the night, I had gathered evidence of Richard's manipulation using Jack's tablet. Screenshots of altered emails, records of financial entanglements, and most importantly, location data from Jack's phone that contradicted Richard's story. According to the location sharing app Jack and I used for safety, when travelling, his phone had last pinged from a location 30 miles west of our house, in the opposite direction from our lake house. The signal had gone offline at 3:47 p.m. yesterday, roughly around the time Richard claimed Jack had left for his retreat. I also discovered something else, a hidden app on Jack's tablet that recorded audio from his office. Jack had installed it after suspecting someone was entering his office while we were both away. The most recent recording was from yesterday, and what I heard chilled me to the bone. "Just drink the rest, Jack. You'll feel better," Richard's voice followed by the sound of liquid pouring. Something's wrong. What did you put in this? Jack's voice was slurred, confused. Nothing to worry about. Just something to help you relax. You've been working too hard, letting that wife of yours push you beyond your limits. Madeline doesn't... Why can't I feel my legs? It's just the sedative. Perfectly safe. Now I need you to sign these papers. For the business. We discussed this, remember. There was a mumbling sound, then Richard again. Good. Now one more. This one's about your marriage. You know it's for the best, Jack. She's not right for you. Never was. No, don't want to. Just sign it, Jack. Then you can rest. The recording ended there. My blood ran cold as I realized what had happened. Richard had drugged my husband and coerced him into signing documents, including what was likely the separation papers he had shown me. And now Jack was somewhere unknown, possibly still under the influence of whatever Richard had given him. I had to get out of the house and find help. The storm had eased overnight according to the weather app on the tablet, which meant roads would soon be passable. I dressed quickly and quietly, packing a small bag with essentials, including the tablet with all the evidence I had gathered. I hid a small voice recorder app running on the tablet, slipped it into my pocket, and prepared to confront Richard one last time. This time on my terms. When I entered the kitchen, Richard was already there, making coffee as if it were a normal morning in his own home. Good morning, Madeline, he said pleasantly. Sleep well. Where is Jack? I asked directly, skipping any pretense. And don't bother with the lake house story. I know he's not there. Richard's expression darkened. We've already discussed this. Jack needed space. After you drugged him, I challenged. After you forced him to sign documents while he was incapacitated. Richard froze momentarily, then recovered. That's quite an accusation. Jack had a couple of drinks. He was perfectly aware of what he was signing. I have the recording, Richard, I said, watching his reaction carefully. From Jack's office. I heard everything. For a moment, genuine alarm flashed across Richard's face before he regained his composure. I don't know what you think you heard, but Jack was upset about your marriage. I gave him something to calm his nerves. He asked for my help. Where is he now? I pressed. Safe, Richard said vaguely. Away from your manipulations. I laughed without humor. That's rich coming from you. I've seen all the emails, Richard. The ones you wrote pretending to be Jack. The way you've been systematically trying to control every aspect of his life. His business, his finances, his marriage. Richard's facade of civility crumbled. I have been guiding that boy since he was 15 years old. Everything he has, everything he's accomplished, has been because of me. And then you came along with your independence and your career ambitions, filling his head with ideas about building his own legacy, making his own choices. You mean helping him become his own person? I countered. Instead of your puppet. Richard slammed his hand on the counter, making me flinch. Jack is the son I never had. I molded him, invested in him. His father was weak, unable to provide proper guidance after his mother died. I stepped in. I made him who he is. You controlled him, I corrected. And when you realized I was encouraging him to make his own decisions, you decided I had to go. Richard didn't deny it. You were never right for him. Your family has no connections, no standing. You pushed him to turn down opportunities I arranged to make business decisions without consulting me. You made him question my guidance. I made him question your control, I said. There's a difference. Richard moved toward me, his expression menacing. It doesn't matter now. By the time Jack is thinking clearly again, you'll be gone. The separation papers are signed. The house will revert to my company's ownership. Your things will be packed and moved out. A clean break. A chill ran down my spine at his words. What do you mean when Jack is thinking clearly again? What have you done to him? Richard smiled coldly. Nothing permanent. Just enough sedation to keep him compliant while we get everything in order. He's always been suggestible. By the time the medication wears off completely, he'll believe everything I tell him about why you left. The casual way he spoke about drugging his stepson horrified me. This wasn't just manipulation, it was criminal. And if Richard was willing to go this far, what else might he do? I'm leaving now, I said firmly. I'm going to find Jack, and then we're going to the police. Richard blocked my path to the door. I can't let you do that, Madeline. You see, Jack needs this clean break. For his own good. For the future of everything we've built. Get out of my way, Richard, I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Or what? He taunted. You'll call for help. There's no one to hear you. You'll run. Where will you go in this weather with no phone, no car keys? He held up my keys, which he must have taken from my purse overnight. In that moment, I realized the full extent of the danger I was in. Richard wasn't just trying to end my marriage. He was willing to do whatever it took to remove me from Jack's life permanently. The predatory look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about his intentions, but he had underestimated me. While he had been busy playing his psychological games, I had been gathering evidence and preparing, and I had one advantage he didn't know about. I wasn't alone anymore. As if on cue, there was a pounding at the front door. "Madeline, are you in there? It's Susan from next door." Richard's head snapped toward the sound, his face contorting with rage. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I sent a message," I said simply. "Through our smart home system, Susan has access to it for emergencies, and this definitely qualifies." The pounding continued, joined by a male voice, Susan's husband, Tom. "Madeline, police are on their way. Are you okay?" Richard lunged for me, but I was ready. I sidestepped his grasp and pushed past him toward the front door, calling out, "I'm here. Richard has my husband somewhere. He's drugged him." I reached the door and fumbled with the locks, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Just as I got the door open, Richard grabbed me from behind his arm around my throat. Susan and Tom stood on the porch, their expressions changing from concern to horror as they saw the situation. Behind them, blue lights flashed as a police car pulled into the driveway. "She's having a breakdown," Richard said smoothly, loosening his grip slightly, but not releasing me. "My stepson's wife. She's been under a lot of stress lately, imagining things." "That's not true," I gasped. "He's drugged Jack, forced him to sign papers. He admitted everything. It's all recorded." I pulled the tablet from my pocket, the recording app still running, capturing everything Richard had just confessed to me in the kitchen. Richard's face drained of colour as he realised his mistake. The police officers approached cautiously, hands on their weapons. "Sir, release the woman and step back," one officer commanded. For a moment, I thought Richard might do something desperate. His grip tightened briefly, then seeming to realise the futility of his position, he released me and stepped back, his expression a mask of cold fury. As the officers separated us, taking statements and calling for backup, I played the recording for them. Both the one from Jack's office yesterday and the conversation Richard and I had just had in the kitchen. The evidence was irrefutable. "Where is my husband?" I asked Richard directly as an officer handcuffed him. Richard's only response was a cold smile. "Jack belongs with family." Those words sent a chill through me, but they also gave me a clue. Family. Not the lake house, but somewhere connected to family. "The cabin?" I said suddenly, turning to the officers. His late wife's family had a hunting cabin about 30 miles west of here. That's where Jack's phone last pinged before it went offline. Within hours, a search team located the cabin and found Jack inside. Disoriented, drugged, but alive. Richard had left him there with limited food and water planning to return after dealing with me, to continue manipulating him while he was vulnerable. As Jack was loaded into an ambulance, his eyes found mine. "Madeline?" he whispered, reaching for my hand. "He said you were leaving me, that you'd found someone else, that you were taking everything." I squeezed his hand, tears flowing freely. "Never. I would never leave you, Jack. Richard lied about everything. He tried to tear us apart. The documents I signed..." Jack's voice was still weak from the drugs. "What did I sign?" "It doesn't matter," I assured him. "They were signed under duress while you were drugged. They'll never stand up legally." As the paramedics prepared to transport Jack to the hospital, I leaned close and whispered, "I have something to tell you when you're feeling better. Something important." Jack managed a small smile. "About the pregnancy test in your suitcase." Despite everything, I laughed through my tears. "How did you know?" "I saw it when I was helping you unpack from your last trip," he admitted. "I was waiting for you to tell me when you were ready." In that moment, despite the trauma we had just endured, I felt a wave of love and certainty. Whatever Richard had tried to destroy between us was still intact. The trust, the communication, the partnership that had always been the foundation of our relationship. As I rode in the ambulance holding Jack's hand, I knew that we had a long road ahead of us. Untangling Richard's financial control over Jack's business, dealing with the legal aftermath of his crimes, and healing from the psychological manipulation he had inflicted on us both. But we would face it together stronger for having survived Richard's attempt to tear us apart. and the child growing inside me would know only the love and honesty that Jack and I were committed to rebuilding in the wake of this ordeal. 1 year later, I sat in our new living room watching Jack cradle our 4-month-old daughter Emily in his arms. The joy on his face as he sang softly to her erased any lingering shadows from the nightmare we had endured the previous Thanksgiving. We had sold our old house, unable to feel comfortable there after what had happened. Our new home was smaller, but filled with warmth and light. A place we had chosen together, with no outside influence or financial strings attached. The months following Richard's arrest had been challenging. Jack had to confront the extent of Richard's manipulation going back years before he even met me. Through therapy, both individually and as a couple, Jack came to recognize the subtle ways Richard had controlled him since his mother's death, positioning himself as the only father figure Jack could rely on, isolating him from other family members, and creating financial dependencies that kept Jack tethered to him. The court case against Richard had revealed even more disturbing details. Financial records showed he had been siphoning money from Jack's company for years. There were emails proving he had deliberately sabotaged potential clients and partnerships that he hadn't arranged himself. Most shockingly, we discovered that Richard had manipulated Jack's father before his death, positioning himself as the executor of the estate and ensuring he maintained control over the family's finances. Richard was ultimately sentenced to 7 years in prison for fraud, coercion, false imprisonment, and assault. Veronica filed for divorce after learning the full extent of his manipulation, unable to reconcile the man she thought she had married with the controlling predator revealed in court. Perhaps the most healing aspect of our recovery was reconnecting with Jack's mother's side of the family, aunts, uncles, and cousins whom Richard had systematically cut Jack off from after his mother's death. They welcomed us with open arms, providing the genuine family connection that Richard had perverted with his possessive control. Through them, Jack received letters his mother had written to him before her death, letters Richard had intercepted and hidden. In them, she expressed her hope that Jack would find his own path in life, follow his own dreams, and surround himself with people who loved him for himself, not for what they could mold him into. She would have loved you, Jack told me one night after reading the letters. She would have loved how you encouraged me to be my own person, to make my own choices. Our marriage grew stronger through the ordeal. We learnt to communicate more openly, to share our fears and doubts directly rather than letting them fester. Jack became more assertive, more confident in his own judgment. I became more attuned to the importance of family connections and creating traditions that were meaningful to us. The business was rebuilt from the ground up, with Jack buying out Richard's shares, using a loan from my parents. It was smaller now, but truly his own, guided by his vision rather than Richard's ambitions. And now, watching him with our daughter, I saw a man fully present in his own life, making choices based on love rather than fear or obligation. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, Aposan, noticing my contemplative expression. "Just how far we've come," I replied, moving to sit beside him. "How different this Thanksgiving will be from the last one." Jack smiled, the shadows completely gone from his eyes. I was thinking the same thing. Last year I nearly lost everything that matters because I couldn't see the manipulation happening right in front of me. I placed my hand on his. We both missed the signs, but we survived and we're stronger for it. "You know what I'm most thankful for this year?" Jack asked, looking down at our sleeping daughter. "What's that?" "Boundaries," he said with a small smile. "Knowing who to let into our lives and who to keep out. Knowing that family isn't about control or ownership, it's about support and love. And trust," I added. "Trusting ourselves and each other enough to speak up when something feels wrong." Emily stirred in Jack's arms, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger in her sleep. The simple gesture brought tears to my eyes. This pure, uncomplicated love that asked for nothing in return. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of our first guests for our Thanksgiving dinner. My parents, followed by Jack's cousins from his mother's side, people who genuinely celebrated our happiness rather than trying to control it. As our home filled with laughter and warmth, I reflected on the most important lesson we had learned. True family isn't defined by blood or legal ties. It's created through respect, honesty, and the freedom to be your authentic self. Richard had tried to build a family based on control and manipulation, and it had crumbled under the weight of its own toxicity. What Jack and I were building was stronger because its foundation was love and mutual support. In the end, that terrible Thanksgiving, when I came home to find my husband gone, had been the catalyst for rebuilding our lives in a healthier, more authentic way. Sometimes it takes facing our greatest fears to discover our greatest strengths. Have you ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself and your family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope this Thanksgiving brings you the love and peace that comes from being surrounded by people who truly support you.